Before we get into the video, I need you guys to do me a favour. Number 1, like the video. Also comment, let me know your thoughts on the story. Notorious Liverpool gangster George Bromley Sr. was a man of many trades. He was a bouncer on a Liverpool nightclub scene. He was a father and a family man. He was also a notorious gangster and was feared and respected enforcer. Tough, astute, gluttonous when it came to a payday, George Bromley Sr. had a lot of gangsters on high alert. On a regular basis, tucked away in the inner seam of his jacket was what people referred to as a crowd pleaser, a sawn-off that would often come out when George was extorting gangsters for their money, their stash of Class A gear, like coke and H and also pills, and regular protection payments. Gangsters like Joe Owens says George had extortion down to a fine art. Now George Bromley was 33 years old at the time of his ruthless murder. George, a known doorman, had biked to Vale Court Road, West Derby, in November 1977. Greeting one-time gangster turned business owner Charlie Seiga settled down in the kitchen for tea. Charlie had invited George over for food. Though George was quiet and very careful with his words, he was very aware that there was a threat to his life. Police had warned George previously. Now Charlie Seiga was making curry for the two men. Opening up the newspaper, the Daily Post, George sat at the kitchen table, reading the news. At some point, a masked gunman had then burst their way through the house, stormed into the kitchen, pushing past Charlie Seiga as though he was a mere afterthought. Charlie had previously given his stance on what happened, however stories had been conflicting, especially on the details. One account, Charlie Seiga, who made his money by cracking safes, saw the flash of a pistol. Afraid, he ran into the back garden. Meanwhile, inside, the gunman aimed his pistol at George, steadied his aim, pressed his finger to the trigger. With a quick inhale, George was struck 3 times in the head. Charlie heard the bang and then remained outside for a few minutes, for fear of his own safety. After a few minutes, cautious, Charlie entered the house and found George slumped forwards, shoulders dropped over the table, a pool of red, a lot. Another account that Charlie gave was he heard a knock on the front door at roughly 6 p.m. He opened the door and greeted the man who shoved a pistol in his face. Charlie watched as the gunman marched himself into the house before George was shot 3 times. The marksmanship and precision proved that the hit on George Bromley Sr. was a professional work, as it had been well planned. Whoever was involved was paid a minimum of $100,000, it was reported. Now Charlie Seiga called the police to report the shooting. At that specific time, George was still alive, despite the fact that part of his was missing. He was then rushed to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Within a span of 72 hours, multiple raids had been conducted across the city, and 3 men were arrested. However, the charges would eventually be dropped. Now, police then arrested Charlie Seiga himself in connection with the high-profile M. He was put into strange race on remand for roughly a year. In 1998, Charlie was then acquitted of an M. So far, the Charlie Bromley Sr. murder has not been solved. However, what's known is George Bromley Sr. was a well-known man. He was feared, so it's likely he had a ton of enemies that would take him out at the instant. Condolences. Stay safe.